Hello students, I am Aarti. Today I am here to discuss the chapter The Fun They Had. The story was written by Isaac Asimov. Before starting the lesson, I shall give a short introduction about the story. This is a live story which is set in the future. The story is about school and the children who do not go to school in those days. Perhaps there might be no existence of schools or books in future, and how those children miss school and all the enjoyment we, the ancestors, that is you, had going to school had. And at the end, we come to know that this was an imagination of a little girl, Margie, who comes to know that in the past all the children used to go to school and study together and feel that all they had fun at school. Okay, children, now let us proceed forward. Before you read, the story we shall read is set in the future when books and schools as we now know them will perhaps not exist. Now will children study? The diagram below may give some ideas. Maybe books and schools might not exist in future as we have now. How could the children study? Observe the picture below. Children, here you can see what would be the schools in future. The children might be learning through computers. There might be a robotic teacher, virtual classrooms, and which classrooms are not the classrooms you have but fully computerized and moving e-books, that is all books we have in the computer. So perhaps children, you all might have come to have an idea what is all this about. So in future the children might only study through computers and robots, and how those children might feel when they come to know about school. That is what we are going to see in this lesson. So, to begin with the story, Margie even wrote about it that night in her diary on the page headed 17 May 2157. She wrote, "Today, Tommy found a real book." So, children, Margie is the main character of the story and she is writing a diary dated 17 May 2157. As I told you, children, right now we are living in 2020 and the story is set in future, almost 140 years from now. And Margie writes that Tommy had found a real book. She feels strange to see a real book because in those times real books do not exist. Only virtual books, that is e-books, which we see in computers. It was a very old book. Margie's grandfather once said that when he was a little boy, his grandfather told him that there was a time when all stories were printed on papers. Now Margie remembers her grandfather. He had told her that his grandfather had studied books printed on paper. So that was a kind of history for these children. So the printed books were actually a history for these children. They had not seen printed books. They were not aware of that because actually all they had was print e-books which they had downloaded from computers. They turned the pages, which were yellow and crinkly, and it was awfully funny to read words that stood still instead of moving the way they were supposed to on a screen, you know. And then, when they turned back to page before, it had the same words on it that it had had when they read it the first time. So Margie is talking about the book. It was old and the pages were turned yellow and crinkly. See, crinkly means somewhat crushed because it was old. They were surprised to see words which stood still. They did not move, but Margie had only seen books on the screen which scrolled and moved on the screen as the screen moves. So they were very surprised to see the words were standing still, and when they turned the pages the words were the same. It was a very strange for those children. They were surprised to see that because they were only used to e-books which they see on the screen, which scrolled whenever they moved, and it always didn't show the same thing on the screen. Gee, said Tommy, what a waste. When you are through with the book, you just throw it away, I guess. Our television screen must have had a million books on it, and it's good for plenty more. I wouldn't throw it away. So now Tommy did not like these printed books. He felt that it was a wastage. So once you complete reading it, you might throw it away. You would have another story written on the same book. He considered that the television screen is far more better because he had read lot of books on it and would read plenty more also and not have to throw the screen away after reading a particular story. So here Tommy is comparing a printed book to an e-book. He didn't like the book because after reading that you have to throw it away. But if it is a screen, if it is a laptop, or if it is a screen or a what is that? Nothing has to be thrown away. So he considered the book as a waste. Same with mine, said Margie. She was 11 and hadn't seen any telly books as Tommy had. He was 13. She said, where did you find it? So see, Margie also agrees. She also agrees with Tommy and says that her television screen is also like Tommy. Margie was 11 and she had not read as many books as Tommy read because Tommy was older to Margie. He was 13 years old. She said, where did you find it? In my house, he pointed without looking because he was busy reading in the attic. So now Margie asked Tommy, where did he find it? Tommy was busy reading the books. He pointed to the roof without looking and told that he found the book in the attic. See, children, attic means a storeroom where you keep all those things which you don't use. That is called as attic. Attic means a storeroom. What's it about? School. See, Margie asked Tommy, what was the book about? Tommy replies that the book was about school, about going to school and life at school. Margie was scornful. School? What is there to write about school? I hate school. So here Margie is scornful. Scornful means showing disliking, that she didn't like school. Margie hated school and said, what was there to write about school? Now we will see why Margie hated school. So she hated school, and now reading forward, we see that why Margie disliked school. Margie always hated school, but now she hated it more than ever. The mechanical teacher had been giving her test after test in geography, and she had been doing worse and worse until her mother had shaken her head sorrowfully and sent for the county inspector. So, why did Margie hate school? Maggie's school was not a school like you all go. It is a virtual classroom where a mechanical teacher, which means a machine, teaching her. It had been giving her test on geography repeatedly. It was going on giving her test, test after test, test after test. And Maggie was unable to perform well. So only Maggie hated school and the teacher and the mechanical teacher. At last, her mother comes to a conclusion that something was wrong with the machine, and she calls for the county inspector who repairs faults in the computer. So, county inspector means a person who repairs the computer. So, she calls for him to repair the computer. So here there is a small description given about that county inspector, that is the person who comes to repair. He was a round little man with a red face and whole box of tools with dials and wires. He smiled at Maggie and gave her an apple, then took the teacher apart. Maggie had hoped he wouldn't know how to put it together again. But he knew how all right, and after an hour or so. So the man was a round little man with a red face. He carried a box full of tools, dials, and wires. He smiled at Maggie and gave her an apple. He gave her an apple. He greeted her with an apple. He took the mechanical teacher. He took the mechanic teacher and he opened it and saw what was the mistake about that. So here Maggie wished that. So here when you see children, Maggie had hoped he wouldn't know how to put together again, but he knew how all right, and after an hour or so, there it was again, large and black and ugly, with a big screen on which all the lessons were shown and the questions were asked. So see children, so what happened? Maggie wished that he doesn't knows to put the computer again. He doesn't knows to fix the computer again, and he let him take away that mechanical teacher with him. She disliked that. So she thought he shouldn't know how to fix that computer right again. But in vain, what happens? He makes it ready, the teacher, in no minutes. So again the teacher was there, that mechanical teacher was there. It was large and black with a big screen where all the lessons and questions were asked. So after that, what happens? That wasn't so bad. The part Maggie hated most was the slot where she had to put homework and test papers. She always had to write them out in a punch code. They made her learn that when she was 6 years old, and the mechanical teacher calculated the marks in no time. So Maggie hated this part because she hated tests and homework. So Maggie has to perform her test and homework in a particular language called punch code, which is a computing language. Margie had learned this language at her early age of 6. when she was 6 years old. So when she was 6 years old itself, she was taught a computing language called the punch code. So she has to perform all the tests and assignments which the computer gave to her in this particular language called the punch code. So she was feeling it very difficult to do that. So she hated that mechanical teacher. So next, so coming to the next children, what happens? The inspector had smiled after he was finished and patted Margie's head. He said to her mother, "It is not the little girl's fault, Mr. Jones. I think the geography sector was geared a little too quick." So the inspector again he patted on Margie's head and tells her mother that it was not Margie's fault for getting low marks in geography, but it was the computer's fault because it was geared a higher level, and that's why Margie was performing bad. So he repairs the computer and says to her mother that it was not Maggie's fault, it was the mission's fault, and it was set in a higher level. And now he has made it correct and yet fixed the computer. Those things happen sometimes. I have slowed it up to an average of 10-year level. Actually, the overall pattern of her progress is quite satisfactory. And he patted Maggie's head again. So sometimes he says that sometimes it would happen in a machine, and the overall performance of Margie was satisfactory, and also tells that he had slowed the computer to a 10-year level. Again, he patted Margie head and left. So again, he patted Margie to encourage her, and he left the house. Margie was disappointed. She had been hoping they would take the teacher away altogether. They had once taken Tommy's teacher away for nearly a month because the history sector had blanked out completely. So here, what was Margie feeling was she was very disappointed. Margie did not like the teacher. She wished they would take it away like they had taken Tommy's teacher away. Tommy's teacher once it had some problem with it, and they had taken away the teacher for a month because the history sector had been blanked out completely. Blanked out means erased completely, which means erased completely. So she said to Tommy, "Why would anyone write about school?" So again she talks about the book. So she had disliked school and told Tommy, why would anyone write about school? And what was there to write about school? So after that, Tommy replies what is happening. Tommy looked at her with very superior eyes. Because it's not our kind of school, stupid. This is the old kind of school that they had hundreds and hundreds of years ago. He had it loftily, pronouncing the word carefully, centuries ago. So he explains what was written about school. He says to Margie, it was not a kind of school which we have now. It is a kind of school in those days. Tommy looked at Margie with superior eyes. Superior eyes means he knows something more about school which Margie didn't know. So Tommy tells Margie that centuries ago means hundreds of years ago, the schools were not the kind of schools which they had now. So Margie was hurt. Well, I don't know what kind of school they had all that time ago. She read the book over her shoulder for a while, then said, anyway, they had a teacher. So when When Tommy told her stupid and like that and shouted her with anger, what happens? Margie was felt hurt when Tommy said like that. So what she says, she says that I do not know about the school in the past. So she tried to read the book over Tommy's shoulders and got curious to know about the schools of the past. When we see the picture below, you can see the Margie's imagination about school where children go and a teacher teaching them. Are you able to see the picture, children? See how Margie's imagining about the school and a teacher teaching there. Sure, they had a teacher, but it wasn't a regular teacher. It was a man. So here he explains, Tommy explains.